This isn't just another war story. It is a story that could have been ripped from the pages of a Hollywood thriller, except every single word of it is true. It was the winter of 1944. Europe was a continent fractured by war. From the frozen beaches of Normandy to the smoldering ruins of Berlin, the sound of machine guns and artillery never stopped. In the skies above, Allied pilots danced with death, dogfights, bombing runs, reconnaissance missions, every flight a gamble with fate. Many were shot down. Some were killed. Were the ones who survived the flames, the flak, and the fall. They faced a different fate, capture. For those unlucky enough to land in enemy hands, there was a place designed not just to hold them, but to break them. A fortress buried deep in the forests of Nazi-occupied Poland. The Germans called it Stalag Luft III, but the men who would soon be imprisoned there, they called it what it truly was: the prison you can't escape. A fortress in the pines. If you were to stumble upon Stalag Luft III by accident, you'd almost miss it. Hidden by towering pine forests, buried under layers of snow in winter and thick undergrowth in summer, the camp was isolated from civilization by miles of wilderness. But isolation wasn't its only weapon. The real brilliance or cruelty of Stalag Luft III was in its construction. The Nazis didn't just build a prison. They built a psychological cage. The barracks, raised off the ground on sturdy wooden stilts, so no one could dig beneath them unnoticed. The soil, a fine, sandy yellow clay, carefully selected so that any displaced earth from below stood out like a bloodstain against a white tablecloth. The perimeter, barbed wire, layered 3 rows deep, encircling the camp like a coiled serpent. Beyond that, watchtowers, manned 24/7 by armed guards with orders to shoot first, question later. And then there were the dogs, snarling, muscular beasts, trained to sniff out the faintest whiff of defiance. Inside the camp, over 10,000 Allied prisoners, mostly pilots. These weren't foot soldiers. They weren't raw recruits. They were the best: American, British, Canadian, Australian, Norwegian, Polish airmen who had risked everything soaring above Europe, only to find themselves grounded, stripped of rank, of dignity, and dumped behind barbed wire. To the Germans, they were trophies to each other. They were the last hope, escape proof. That's what they said. The Nazis bragged about Stalag Luft III, escape proof, they called it. It's not a boast, a fact. Every detail of the camp screamed it. The raised barracks made tunneling visible. The sandy soil betrayed any attempt to dig. The open spaces between huts provided no shadows, no cover. The warning wire, a waist-high string running inside the perimeter, was a kill line. Step beyond it. Key. Even the location, deep in the heart of Nazi territory, made escape feel pointless. Key. Even if you somehow slipped past the guards, what then? K. Hundreds of miles of hostile land. German patrols. No friends. K. No shelter. 4. New arrivals. The message was crystal clear. Don't even think about it. But here's the thing about fighter pilots. They never listened to reason. And among them, there were whispers. Whispers of a plan, a rebellion, a prison break so audacious, so impossible. It would humiliate the Nazis on a scale they'd never forget. But before the whispers became actions, before history was written, the camp itself had to be understood. And the men behind the wire, they were studying every inch, a living map inside Stalag Luft III. Survival wasn't just about staying alive, it was about staying sharp. Pilots who once navigated enemy skies now navigated the rhythms of prison life. Roll calls, tears, inspections. But behind every routine, they searched for cracks in the system. They noted guard rotations. They memorized patrol routes. They timed how long the searchlights lingered on certain areas. They learned which guards were strict, which could be bribed, which simply didn't care. And every scrap of information, every observation, every overheard conversation became part of an invisible map. A blueprint for the impossible. The spirit that wouldn't die Stalag Luft III wasn't just barbed wire and wooden huts. It was a pressure cooker of tension and defiance. Inside, the men joked. They shared stories. They taught each other languages, chess, even stage plays to keep their minds sharp. But beneath the surface, they planned. There were secret committees, underground networks, signals passed in plain sight, a hand gesture here, a cough there, hidden compartments in walls, tunnels disguised beneath stoves or wobs. The Germans thought they'd caged lions. What they didn't realize, lions don't forget how to hunt. And one man, a man that underestimated from the moment he arrived, was preparing to lead the pride. The arrival of Big X Roger Bushell, Royal Air Force, squadron leader, downed over France, captured, escaped once already, only to be recaptured. But the Germans made one mistake. They put him in Stalag Luft III, and from the moment Bushell arrived, he didn't see a prison. He saw a challenge, tall, charismatic, sharp as a razor. His fellow prisoners called him Big X, not just for his rank in the Escape Committee, but for the X that marked his name on every Nazi watch list. Bushell wasn't reckless. He was strategic, obsessed even. He understood the stakes. Escape wasn't just about freedom. It was about pride. It's about defiance. It's about reminding the Nazis they weren't invincible. A place built to crush hope, breeding it instead ironically. The prison's very design, meant to crush dreams of escape, did the opposite. Every barrier, every security measure, every smug, condescending lecture from the guards, it fueled the fire. The men in Stalag Luft III weren't cowed. They were engineers, forgers, masters of deception, veterans of survival. They didn't just endure, okay? They created fake documents from Red Cross packaging. They dyed uniforms from crushed berries and boot polish. They learned German phrases, memorized train schedules, and mapped out every possible route to the border. The camp, designed as a monument to Nazi superiority, was becoming a workshop of rebellion. And under Bushell's leadership, that rebellion was about to evolve. The calm before the storm, the winter of 1944, brought more than snow. It brought silence, an eerie, suffocating quiet. The Germans grew complacent. They believed their escape-proof fantasy, but beneath the barracks, under the noses of the guards, something extraordinary was happening. A network was forming. Tunnels were being planned. Resources gathered. Identities forged. The men of Stalag Luft III weren't just dreaming of freedom. They were digging for it, and soon, the most daring, most ingenious, most dangerous prison break of World War II would begin. But for now, it looked like just another bitter, quiet winter day behind the wire. Appearances, as always, were deceiving. Night after night, as the pale moon drifted silently over Stalag Luft III, a different war was being fought. It wasn't waged with guns, tanks, or bombers, but with spoons, saw blades, and sheer human will. Deep inside the barbed wire walls of the Nazi prison camp, a group of Allied airmen had declared war, not just on their captors, but on the very notion of captivity itself. This was no ordinary prison camp. Stalag Luft III, tucked away in the dense pine forests of Sagan, Germany, was purpose-built to be escape-proof. The Germans had spared no expense, elevated barracks to detect tunneling, seismograph microphones buried deep in the earth, floodlights, double barbed wire fences, and relentless patrols. To the casual eye, it was an impenetrable fortress, a place where hope withered and dreams of freedom died. But they underestimated the men held within. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were the best. Bomber crews, fighter pilots, navigators, the elite of the Allied air forces. Men who had danced with death over the skies of Europe, who had parachuted into enemy territory, who had survived burning wrecks and cold capture. Their minds were honed, not just for war, but for problem solving, for patience, for courage. And as winter 1943 bled into 1944, those minds began to turn, quietly, methodically, towards the impossible. It started, as all great rebellions do, with an idea. The mastermind was squadron leader Roger Bushell, a British RAF pilot with piercing eyes and an unshakable resolve. To the Germans, he was just another number behind the wire. But to the prisoners, he was Big X, the architect of what would become the most ambitious prison break in history. His vision was audacious. Not just one escape tunnel. Cake Tom, Dick, and Harry. One was discovered. The others would remain. System of redundancy as precise as any military operation. But it wasn't just about escape. It was about defiance. It was about tying up German resources, sowing chaos, proving that even behind the wire, the Allied spirit could not be caged. Bushell assembled a team: engineers, surveyors, forgers, tailors, scroungers, each man chosen for his skill, his discretion, and above all, his unbreakable resolve. They worked in the shadows. By day, they walked the compound like ordinary prisoners, playing cards, reading books, repairing uniforms. By night, they became ghosts. The first challenge was the soil. Stalag Luft III was built on sandy ground that collapsed easily. Tunnels would be unstable, prone to cave-ins. But the prisoners found a way. Bedboards, stolen from their own bunks, were repurposed into shoring beams. Air pumps, fashioned from biscuit tins and old hockey sticks, kept the tunnels breathable. Lighting was rigged using stolen wire and makeshift bulbs. Every piece of material had to be scavenged, hidden, repurposed. And then there were the dirt disposal teams. Hundreds of cubic feet of sand had to be concealed, an impossible task. Unless you had ingenuity, the penguin system was born. Prisoners with specially made bags hidden in their trousers would walk the compound, subtly releasing sand through slits in their clothing. With each step, the sand scattered into the soil, blending in unnoticed. Day after day, hour after hour, the earth beneath Stalag Luft III was moved, handful by handful. Beneath the noses of their captors, documents were forged with breathtaking precision: fake IDs, travel papers, railway passes, all crafted with stolen ink, makeshift stamps, and boundless nerve. Clothing was tailored from blankets, old uniforms, scraps of fabric, every detail meticulously crafted to help escapees blend into the civilian population once they emerged. But danger lurked at every turn. The Germans weren't fools. Guards patrolled relentlessly. Seismographs listened for the faintest vibrations. Dogs sniffed for human scent underground. Tensions ran high. A single slipper, careless whisper, a discovered tool. A misstep in the sand and the entire operation could crumble. There were close calls. Once, while working on Tom, a tunnel nearly collapsed, trapping a man inside. Muffled cries echoed through the sand as the others clawed desperately to free him. He emerged, shaken but alive, but it was a reminder. One mistake could mean death. On another occasion, the Germans discovered Tom. It was a devastating blow. Months of work lost, but Bushell was ready. Harry and Dick remained. Work continued, with doubled caution and sharpened resolve. The tunnels were marvels of ingenuity. Narrow, dark, claustrophobic, they stretched over 100 meters towards the pine forest beyond the wire. Inside, men crawled on their bellies, breathing recycled air, their world reduced to sand, wood, and shadows. Above ground, the compound became a theater of deception. Lookouts, known as stooges, watched the guards. Signals were relayed silently, eyes darting, hands shifting, a code of survival passed from man to man. Months dragged on. Snow fell, spring approached. The plan remained hidden. By March 1944, Harry was complete. A narrow, reinforced tunnel stretching beneath the wire, under the guard towers, and into the forest. The escape was set for the night of March 24th, but the true victory was not measured only in those who would escape, but in the unbreakable spirit, the defiant ingenuity, the refusal to surrender. Stalag Luft III was a prison built to crush hope, but within its walls, a group of men waged a silent war, fought not with bullets, but with brains, courage, and the belief that no cage, no matter how fortified, could imprison the human spirit. And on that bitter March night, as they prepared to slip beneath the earth and towards freedom, the world would bear witness to what happens when the unbreakable minds of free men refuse to bow to tyranny. The night air in Stalag Luft III was thick with tension, an invisible pressure building beneath the cold sky. Above ground, the camp appeared calm, the guards on routine patrols, the prisoners playing their parts in the endless charade of captivity. But beneath their feet, hidden in the dark soil, an audacious race against time was unfolding. The tunnel, codenamed Harry, was nearly complete. Every inch of that narrow, claustrophobic passage represented months of painstaking labor, wood plank, scoop of dirt by scoop of dirt, all done in whispers and stolen moments. But they weren't just digging. They were running a race, one where the stakes were life, liberty, and the unyielding hope of freedom, the relentless ticking clock. The prisoners knew the Germans would intensify their vigilance as rumors of escape plans swirled. The stakes were immense. If the tunnel was discovered before it was ready, all their work and lives would be lost. The men worked in shifts, some digging, some hauling dirt, others forging documents, tailoring clothes, or crafting disguises. The challenge wasn't just physical, it was psychological warfare. Every sound could be a warning, every shadow a threat. The prisoners developed a code of silence, a choreography of signals to communicate without words. Eyes met, hands clenched, bodies froze at the slightest hint of approaching danger. The ingenuity of survival. The tunnel itself was a marvel of covert engineering, constructed deep enough to evade the German seismographs that could detect vibrations underground. It stretched over 300 feet, curving under the barbed wire fence, ending in a small clearing just beyond the forest's edge. Air pumps, crafted from scavenged materials, a hockey stick shaft, a tin can, and rubber tubing, pumped fresh air into the suffocating darkness. Lights rigged from stolen wires flickered dimly, guiding the men through the labyrinthine passage to shore up the sandy walls. The prisoners fashioned makeshift supports from bed slats, secretly removed piece by piece. It was a delicate balance. Too little support meant collapse. Too much could attract attention. The disguise of normalcy above ground. The camp was a stage. Every prisoner played his role to perfection. Some acted oblivious, joking with guards, playing cards in the daylight. Others moved quietly, collecting scraps, tools, or documents. The Penguin's prisoners, tasked with disposing of the vast quantities of tunnel dirt, walked the compound wearing specially modified bags that released fine sand with each step. To the untrained eye, it looked like a simple gait, but it was the product of genius, dispersing tons of earth without a whisper of suspicion. Close calls and heart-stopping moments. But the Germans were no fools. Seismographs detected faint vibrations. Guard dogs sniffed the air. Its patrols changed their routes unpredictably. Stay brought new threats. Once, while working deep in a tunnel, a prisoner heard footsteps above. Hearts pounding, the diggers froze, holding their breath in the suffocating dark. Outside, a guard's boots echoed dangerously close. Minutes stretched like hours until the footsteps receded. Another time, hidden cache of tools was nearly discovered during a surprise barracks inspection. The prisoners barely managed to hide their implements behind loose floorboards, praying the inspectors wouldn't linger. The creation of lifelike decoys, one of the most ingenious aspects of the escape plan, was the creation of dummy heads, crafted painstakingly from paper match, painted with stolen grease paint to mimic skin tone, complete with human hair stolen from the barbershop. These decoys were placed in prisoners' beds each night, under dim light. With blankets pulled up to cover the bodies, the guards were fooled into thinking the prisoners were asleep, buying precious hours for the tunnelers below. Tensions boiled to a breaking point as the tunnel neared completion. Stress gripped the camp. Whispers of suspicion spread. Paranoia crept into the minds of men forced into close quarters under immense pressure. Arguments broke out, nerves frayed. But amid the chaos, leadership held firm. Roger Bushell reminded them the price of failure was too high. Their unity was their greatest weapon. The final preparations March 1944. The date was set. Disguises were completed. Forged papers, forged from painstaking observation of German protocols, lay ready. Escape routes mapped. Every man rehearsed his role. Every detail scrutinized. The plan was bold. On a single night, dozens of men would slip through the tunnel under the cover of darkness, disappear into the forest, and attempt to make their way to freedom. The night of reckoning, when the moment came. Nerves exploded into adrenaline. One by one, prisoners descended into the tunnel, squeezing through the dark, inching forward in suffocating silence. The air was thick, the walls cold and damp. Time blurred as they crawled, one after another, toward the unknown beyond above ground. The guards remained oblivious, lulled by the sight of dummy heads and the usual noises of camp life. Aftermath and legacy. Its escape was the largest in Allied history, an extraordinary testament to human ingenuity, courage, and the refusal to accept imprisonment, though not all would make it home. The impact was profound. The Germans intensified security, wasting resources, hunting down escapees, and for the prisoners still confined, hope burned brighter than ever. The Great Escape was not just about breaking walls, it was about breaking spirits. It was a symbol that no matter how deep the darkness, the human desire for freedom could never be buried. The cold wind whispered through the pine trees surrounding Stalag Luft III as the sun finally dipped below the horizon. Darkness cloaked the camp like a velvet curtain, masking the tension that hung heavy in the air. Tonight was no ordinary night. It was the night the prisoners had risked everything for. The night the long months of secret toil and sacrifice would be put to the ultimate test. Inside the cramped barracks, men moved with quiet purpose. Faces once filled with hope now bore a mixture of anxiety and determination. Every heartbeat echoed the same question. Would they make it? Would freedom finally be within reach? Or would this be the night that crushed their dreams forever? A final. Czech squadron leader Roger Bushell, known to all as Big X, stood at the center of the chaos, orchestrating the final preparations with military precision. His piercing eyes scanned the faces of the men, reading their fear, their courage, their resolve. "We move in groups," he whispered. "No unnecessary noise. Stay focused. Remember, the success of this escape depends on each and every one of you." Every man had been assigned a role, a sequence. The tunnel Harry, their lifeline to freedom, lay beneath the barracks, dark and narrow, 100 feet of cold earth separating them from the forest beyond the wire. Bushell's voice barely rose above a breath, yet it carried the weight of hope, the silent descent, one by one. Prisoners slipped from their bunks and made their way to the tunnel entrance. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fear. The only sounds were muffled whispers and the occasional creak of floorboards. The first escapees descended into the darkness, squeezing through the narrow shaft. The tunnel walls closed in, the space no larger than a coffin, forcing them to crawl on their bellies through the claustrophobic passage. Each man carried only what was essential: forged papers, a small packet of food, a map, and a heart pounding with desperate hope. The ticking clock above ground, the guards conducted their usual patrols, unaware of the silent exodus beneath their feet. Dummy heads lay in bunks, fooling the sentries into thinking the prisoners were asleep. But time was not on the prisoners' side. Every minute increased the risk of discovery. Every shadow cast by a flashlight could signal the end dot. The tension was suffocating. A whisper of betrayal rumors had circulated for weeks, whispers of spies within the camp, formers watching from the shadows. Paranoia gnawed at the men, but no one dared voice their fears aloud. Bushell knew that one mistake, one betrayal, could unravel everything. The escape unfolds through the tunnel. Men emerged into the cold night beyond the wire. The forest welcomed them like a dark guardian, offering concealment but no guarantees. Groups split off, moving swiftly but cautiously along predetermined routes. Forged documents were clutched tightly. Every interaction with German patrols carried the risk of exposure. Some found luck in the shadows, slipping past checkpoints. Others were caught, dragged back into the nightmare. Close calls and heart-stopping moments sent the darkness. Footsteps echoed. A distant bark of a dog pierced the silence. A sudden flashlight beams sliced through the trees. A man froze, heart hammering, breath held as a German patrol swept past mere feet away. Another group encountered a roadblock. Quick thinking and calm nerves saved them from capture. The night was a crucible of fear and resolve. The cost of freedom by dawn. Only a handful had made it beyond the perimeter, vanishing into the vastness of the German countryside. Many were recaptured. Some paid with their lives. The Gestapo's brutal reprisals were swift and merciless. A grim reminder of the stakes involved. Legacy of the night, though the escape did not grant freedom to all. It shattered the illusion of invincibility the Nazis had built around Stalag Luft III. The audacity, the intelligence, courage displayed that night echoed far beyond the barbed wire fences. It became a symbol, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be broken. A story whispered across the Allied forces, inspiring hope amidst despair. Epilogue years later. The world would remember that night not just as a daring escape attempt, but as a defining moment of bravery and sacrifice. The Great Escape was more than a plan. It was a declaration. No matter the walls, no matter the guards, freedom is a fire that burns within the soul, impossible to extinguish. The dawn was supposed to bring relief, a calm after the long, tense night. Instead, it shattered hope and ignited fury. Stalag Luft II's Great Escape had been the Allied prisoners' boldest, most daring bid for freedom, but it was about to become a nightmare none would forget. The chilling discovery as the first faint light crept over the camp. The guards began their morning rounds. Their routine eyes soon caught something amiss. Loose earth, fresh signs of disturbance near the barracks. Suspicion rippled through the ranks. Soon, a brutal search began. The Germans uncovered the tunnel, its mouth concealed by a cleverly designed false floor. But that was only the beginning. When they found Harry, the main tunnel used in the escape, the scale of the operation was revealed. 300 feet of underground passage, reinforced with stolen bedboards, air pumps fashioned from scraps, and lighting wired from stolen cables. The shock hit the German command hard. Alarm and outrage for months. The camp had been a battleground for quiet defiance. Now, the walls themselves had been betrayed. Commandant Friedrich Wilhelm von Lindener was furious. But the rage was directed not only at the prisoners, but at his own officers. How had such a massive plan gone unnoticed? Reports flooded Berlin. The Nazi leadership demanded swift and brutal action. The manhunt begins outside the camp. The hunt was merciless. The 76 men who had escaped under cover of darkness were now fugitives in enemy territory. German forces, including the Gestapo, SS, and local police, mobilized in force. Roadblocks were set, checkpoints manned, patrols doubled, villages and towns were scoured. The atmosphere thickened with fear and suspicion. Every stranger was a potential escapee. Terror in the shadows for the escapees. Freedom was a fleeting mirage. Few had the maps, language skills, or supplies to navigate the hostile landscape. Many were quickly apprehended. Others were betrayed by informants. And then the darkest chapter unfolded. The bloody reprisals. The Nazi leadership, enraged by the audacity of the escape, ordered a chilling reprisal. Hitler himself demanded that the escapees not be treated as ordinary prisoners of war. The Gestapo was instructed to execute a significant number of recaptured men in the weeks following. 50 of the escapees were taken from custody in small groups. They were shot without trial. Their deaths, falsely reported as attempts to escape. The world would later learn of these murders as one of the most brutal war crimes committed by the Nazis. Shock and disbelief. News of the executions sent shockwaves through the Allied forces and beyond. Families waited in agonizing uncertainty inside the camps. Prisoners were gripped by grief and rage, but amidst the sorrow, a grim determination took hold. Their sacrifice would not be forgotten. The psychological toll back in Stalag Luft III. Those who remained faced heightened surveillance and harsh punishment. The air was thick with mistrust and fear, yet even in despair, camaraderie endured. The prisoners clung to stories of the escape, finding strength in their comrades' courage. The incident galvanized efforts in other camps, inspiring further resistance. The investigation and reckoning after the war. Allied investigators relentlessly pursued justice. The men responsible for the murders were hunted down. Trials were held, and many Gestapo officers faced execution or imprisonment. The Great Escape and its bloody aftermath became a symbol of Nazi brutality and Allied resilience. Legacy beyond the fences. The story of the Great Escape transcended its immediate tragedy. It became a testament to human courage, ingenuity, and the unyielding desire for freedom. Books, films, and documentaries immortalized the event, inspiring generations. The 50 men who died were honored as heroes, men who paid the ultimate price in the fight against tyranny. Reflection. The Great Escape was never just about breaking free from prison walls. It was a declaration of defiance against oppression, though the cost was horrific. The legacy endured, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, the flame of hope and resistance can never be extinguished. In the dead of night, beneath a moonless sky that offered only the faintest glimmer of stars, a dozen desperate men slipped through the shadows of a sprawling German prisoner of war camp. The cold earth beneath their boots was hard and unforgiving, but the fire burning inside them was fiercer still, the fire of freedom. This was the climax of the most daring breakout in the history of war prisons. The escape from Stalag Luft III. But as the dawn of May 1944 crept over the horizon, a brutal truth settled in of the 76 men who had slipped out through a painstakingly dug tunnel. Only 3 would ultimately taste the sweet, elusive fruit of freedom. The tunnel's end. A moment of triumph and terror. The escape plan was a masterpiece of human ingenuity and sheer willpower. For months, the prisoners' officers of the Allied Air Forces had labored in secret, digging under the noses of their captors a tunnel more than 300 feet long, complete with wooden supports, crude ventilation, and lighting. It was a feat born from necessity and desperation, crafted in the dark recesses of mines and tunnels alike. At 10:30 p.m. on the night of March 24th, 1944, the first man began to crawl out of the tunnel's muddy mouth into the cold, bitter air of the Sagan woods that bordered the camp. Each man had a destination and a plan, but what none could know was how the gears of fate and war would grind against their hopes. The first to emerge were the trailblazers, men like the charismatic Roger Bushell, the mastermind behind the Escape, Brian Jerry Jenkins, a resourceful Welsh officer, and Joe, Big Joe Bales, a sturdy man with nerves of steel. They slipped quietly through the darkness, hearts pounding, knowing the camp guards would soon discover the empty bunks and raise the alarm. The manhunt begins indeed. Within hours, the camp was in turmoil. The guards had discovered the tunnel's mouth, the telltale signs of escape, and the absence of dozens of prisoners. The alarm was raised, and the machinery of Nazi security churned into action. German patrols fanned out into the surrounding countryside. Checkpoints were established on every road and railway line. Hundreds of SS men, Gestapo agents, and local police joined the frantic search. Meanwhile, the escapees faced a race against time in a hostile landscape. Many had only a rough map, civilian clothes smuggled from camp, and a few ration packs. The brutal winter chill gnawed at their resolve, and the dangers were enormous. The brutal reality of escape of the 76 men who tunneled out that night. 73 were recaptured within weeks, some within days. The story of their capture is one of nerve-wracking cat-and-mouse chases through dense forests, desperate attempts to hitch rides on trains, and heartbreaking near misses. One man, a pilot named Tom Kirby Green, tried to travel by train but was stopped at a checkpoint near Berlin. Another, the charming Dick Churchill, made it as far as the Danish border before being caught, as they were caught. The prisoners faced cruel interrogations, their hopes extinguished one by one. But the true horror was yet to come. The Gestapo's bloody retribution. The Nazi regime was furious. This bold escape had not only embarrassed them, but risked inspiring other prisoners. Hitler, furious at the mass breakout, ordered the execution of many of the recaptured prisoners as an example, under the cover of night. Gestapo agents took men from their cells and executed them without trial. The chilling phrase "shot while trying to escape" became a deadly euphemism. By the end of the purge, 50 of the escapees were murdered in cold blood. This ruthless act shocked the Allied forces and the world once the truth was revealed after the war. The 3 men who defied fate, yet amid this storm of betrayal and bloodshed, 3 men managed to beat the odds. They slipped the noose of the Gestapo, evaded recapture, and made it back to safety, a testament to courage, quick thinking, and a bit of luck. Flight Lieutenant Bram van der Stok, a Dutch airman, was one of them. After crawling through the tunnel, he traveled nearly 300 miles south toward neutral Switzerland, disguised as a French worker and aided by members of the French resistance. He crossed borders under a constant threat of discovery. After weeks of danger and close calls, he finally reached the Swiss border and crossed into freedom. Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Dodge, a British Army officer, made his way west, aiming for the Dutch border. Using forged papers and adopting various disguises, he navigated treacherous roads and relied heavily on the kindness of sympathetic locals. His journey was filled with tension, but he ultimately succeeded in crossing into Allied-controlled territory. The 3rd was Lieutenant Herbert Harry Warner, Canadian Air Force officer. His escape was marked by quick decisions and daring moves, including stealing a German vehicle to blend in. After many close calls and nights spent hiding in barns and forests, he also managed to reach Allied lines. The aftermath, a legacy carved in courage for the rest of the prisoners. The escape became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the cruel realities of war. But for the 3 men who succeeded, it was a personal triumph. A flicker of light in the darkness, the Great Escape inspired countless others during the war, and remains one of the most legendary episodes in military history. It was a story of ingenuity, resilience, and the unyielding human desire for freedom. The final reflection today. The memory of Stalag Luft III and its inmates lives on. Memorials stand near the site, honoring those who risked everything to break the chains of captivity, those who perished, and those who survived to tell the tale. The fact that only 3 men out of 76 made it to freedom underscores the perilous nature of their endeavor. But it also highlights a deeper truth, that freedom is precious, often costly, sometimes only won by a few brave souls willing to pay the price. The cold wind swept over the fields of what had once been Stalag Luft III, a grim German POW camp nestled in the pine forests of Saigon, now Saigon, Poland. The rustling trees whispered stories of courage, sacrifice, and defiance. These woods had witnessed one of the most daring, audacious, and tragic chapters in the annals of World War II, the Great Escape of 1944. More than 75 years have passed since those fateful nights, but the legacy of Stalag Luft III remains undimmed, a testament to the indomitable human spirit, the relentless will to be free, and the cost such defiance exacts. This is the story of that legacy, how the seeds of rebellion, planted in the shadows of captivity, blossomed into a beacon of hope, symbol of courage, and a solemn reminder of the price of freedom. It began with a flicker, a spark in the hearts of men who refused to accept chains. Captured Allied airmen, many from the United States, Britain, Canada, and the Netherlands, found themselves trapped behind barbed wire, guarded by armed soldiers, deep in enemy territory. Yet, surrender was never in their vocabulary. Their spirits forged in the fires of combat, they transformed despair into determination. A group of officers, led by squadron leader Bushell, a man whose mind was as sharp as a razor, hatched a plan to shatter the walls of their imprisonment. Not with brute force, but with ingenuity. The construction of a tunnel beneath the camp was no mere escape attempt. It was a carefully orchestrated act of rebellion, a silent scream into the face of tyranny. This was more than digging dirt. It was about reclaiming dignity, rewriting fate, and challenging the enemy's grip. The night of March 24th, 1944, remains etched in history. 76 men squeezed through a dark, narrow tunnel that stretched more than 300 feet beneath the camp, emerging into the cold, polished night. For a brief, shining moment, the impossible seemed within reach. But fate had other plans. Only 3 men ultimately escaped to freedom. The rest were caught, and 50 were executed by the Gestapo in brutal reprisal. The camp was closed shortly after. The prisoners were moved elsewhere, and the land was reclaimed by time. Yet, the echoes of their defiance reverberated far beyond those dark woods. News of the escape and the horrific executions leaked out through underground networks and reached Allied command. The public was horrified. The callous murder of prisoners of war was a flagrant violation of the Geneva Conventions in Washington. London and Ottawa leaders vowed justice. Investigations into the Stalag Luft III murders were launched, and after the war, many of the perpetrators were hunted down, tried, brought to justice. The legacy of the Great Escape transformed from a tale of tragedy into a rallying cry for justice and human rights. Beyond the headlines and official reports, the escape inspired countless personal stories, tales of bravery, sacrifice, friendship, and resilience. One such story was that of Bram van der Stok, the Dutch airman, who reached Switzerland after weeks of perilous travel, aided by courageous members of the resistance. His journey was a testament to human endurance and the power of solidarity. Others, like the British pilot Bob Nelson, continued to resist even after recapture, embodying the spirit that refused to be broken. Their stories were shared in letters, memoirs, and whispered in quiet moments in barracks, long after the war ended. The Great Escape quickly captured the imagination of people around the world. Books were written, documentaries filmed, and in 1963, the famous movie, The Great Escape, immortalized the story on the silver screen, starring Steve McQueen and a cast of Hollywood legends. The film's gripping scenes of ingenuity, tension, courage brought the story to millions, but beyond entertainment. The lessons of Stalag Luft III influenced military training and prison security worldwide. The Escape highlighted the need for vigilance, the importance of morale among prisoners, and the enduring need for innovation, even in captivity. The site of the former camp became a place of pilgrimage for families, veterans, and historians. Memorials were erected, simple stone markers, plaques, and a small museum preserving artifacts from the camp. Every year, on the anniversary of the escape, ceremonies honored the memory of those who risked and lost their lives in pursuit of freedom. These acts of remembrance serve as a powerful reminder of the human cost of war and the enduring spirit of those who refuse to surrender in a world still rife with conflict and oppression. The story of Stalag Luft III resonates deeply. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can shine with brilliant defiance. It teaches courage in the face of overwhelming odds, ingenuity born from necessity, the unyielding desire for freedom. It challenges us to remember that freedom is never free. It demands sacrifice, resilience, and sometimes the ultimate price. Names like Roger Bushell, Big Joe Bales, Bram Vanderstock, and many others now belong to history. But behind each name was a man with hopes, fears, and dreams. Their letters home, journals, and testimonies revealed the complex humanity behind the legend. They remind us that these were not mere soldiers or prisoners. They were sons, brothers, fathers, friends, men who dared to dream of a life beyond the fences. Veterans, groups, historians, and educators keep the memory alive through storytelling, reenactments, and educational programs. Their goal is to pass on the lessons of courage and resilience to new generations, ensuring that the legacy of Stalag Luft III continues to inspire. Through this living memory, The Great Escape remains not only a story of war, but a timeless parable of hope and human dignity. Epilogue. Freedom's price and promise. The legacy of Stalag Luft III is a mosaic of triumph and tragedy, bravery and brutality, hope and heartbreak. It teaches us that freedom, no matter how precious, is fragile and must be defended relentlessly. It stands as a monument to those who refuse to be prisoners in body or spirit, who dared to dig beneath the earth and break the chains that bound them, and, in their courage, we find an enduring light, a light that continues to guide us in the ongoing struggle for liberty and justice.